You are listening to the Courageously Unconventional podcast. If you want to change your life and start living on your own terms, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Lynn Grogan. I'm a certified life coach, and I want to help you take action toward creating your own unconventional life. Each week, I'll share inspiring and unconventional stories from those who have gone before you, as well as actionable steps you can take to start your own unconventional path today. Let's go! Welcome back to the podcast, my friend. So today I want to talk about those moments in life when everything feels shaky and uncertain, like you're just holding on, waiting for the dust to settle. We've all been there. Maybe you're in it right now, stuck in that strange space where the future is a big old question mark and our minds spin with all those what ifs. So I'm going to start out this podcast by sharing a recent story that happened to my husband and I, and then I'll relate that to some things that you may be experiencing in your own life right now. All right, so let's get into it. The other day, my husband Josh and I were driving just outside of Flagstaff, Arizona. If you're not familiar with it, it's like northern Arizona. And I was on my phone texting a friend, and he was on the driver's seat when suddenly the truck started shaking violently, like out of control. I had no idea what was happening. It was like a flat tire. Is it an earthquake, which is unlikely for the area, but maybe? Or like, did the roads suddenly cave in? It turns out we were experiencing the infamous Ford truck death wobble. Yeah, it is called a death wobble. So Josh has been warning me about this wobble thing for years, but it seemed like one of those clickbait horror stories that doesn't actually happen to people. Oh, I was terribly wrong. So if you're not familiar with the death wobble, and I hope that you're not, it's like when the front of the vehicle starts violently shaking, like the tires are trying to turn left and right at the same time, and it can feel like your entire vehicle is about to fall apart. It's intense and it is terrifying, and sometimes the only way to stop is to pull over, which is exactly what we did. So thankfully, we were on a stretch of Interstate 40 with a super wide shoulder, and we managed to pull over safely. And what was super lucky is that we weren't towing our trailer at the time, because that would have been super duper scary. But what felt kind of unlucky after we were pulled over is that now we were on the side of the road, very busy interstate, with all of these semi trucks just roaring past. And we weren't really sure what to do next. Like, should we stop driving altogether and maybe get a tow truck? Like, should we pretend it was just a fluke and keep going? Should we call a bunch of people, ask for advice? And of course, like, we started Googling our situation, and unsurprisingly, the internet offered lots of information, some of it very scary, and there was no clear-cut answer about what to do next. So eventually we decided that maybe it would be okay to get into town, so we got into Flagstaff, and we decided to just, figure things out in a much calmer setting. At that point, the truck was no longer shaking, which was good, but we were shaking. We were shook. So when you travel full time, your vehicle is the lifeblood of your operation. So if your vehicle is out of commission, so are you. And it can be tricky to know how to proceed. And I know a lot of other people have this relationship with their vehicle too. I know it's not special to us, but when it's your own life, it feels very, very special. So what we learned from our research is that the death wobble is a known issue that can be tricky to diagnose and fix, because it's just so hard to replicate again in the hands of a mechanic, which of course only added to our uncertainty and fear. But ultimately, we decided a mechanic was our next best step. So let's just say it was an unsettling few days. They had our truck for about, 2 days. And as my husband put it, the best case scenario would be that they'd have a clear diagnosis and a repair, no matter what it was going to cost. And the worst case scenario would be no answers and living with the looming fear that this could happen again, maybe with worse consequences the next time. So as you can imagine, our brains entertain lots and lots of very colorful and dramatic possibilities, and we did our best to keep ourselves calm. So what does this have to do with you? Today, as this podcast episode airs, it is the day after a major U.S. election. And like the aftermath of our truck situation, many of you might just feel stuck in a strange limbo where you don't know what the future holds. And this type of liminal space can feel like its own version of a death wobble, where the world just seems to be shaking uncontrollably and you have no clue if the outcome will, quote unquote, fix what feels wrong. You wish you could just do the equivalent of pulling over and letting things calm down. Because let's be honest, it can feel pretty terrible to live without answers, to be feeling so much uncertainty. So let's talk about navigating these feelings. The good news is that we've all already proven we can live with unpredictability. We all did it through the pandemic. And I've bet you've had many other experiences in life where you had to wait anxiously for an answer. Maybe it was a diagnosis, the results of an exam, or for someone else to make a big decision. And in these in-between moments, it is so easy to spiral into frightening stories about what might happen. If this person is elected, here's how things could fall apart. If this happens, here's how everything could go wrong. These worst case scenarios are very easy to find. In fact, sometimes it's almost impossible to find stories with more hopeful or even happy endings. And even if you did find them, when you're feeling anxious, it's pretty hard to believe that anything good could happen from feeling so terrible. I was reading this book yesterday, and there was this brilliant line that talked about anxiety masquerading as intuition, right? Because when we feel super anxious, it can feel like you're getting this intuitive hit about what's to come, even when you know intellectually you can't predict the future. So the very tricky thing about our very wonderful brains is that they don't actually differentiate between real and imagined stress. Our brains process real threats and imagined ones almost identically, like they light up in the same way in our brains. So the stories and ideas we expose ourselves to have a real impact, even if they aren't actually happening. So what can you do? So my best advice for you, and you've probably heard this a lot lately, is to be mindful of your inputs, of the stories and ideas that you're exposing your brain to. So like, what are you reading? How much are you scrolling? What kinds of conversations are you having? And then insert a pause. And in that space that you create, ask yourself, okay, how much of what I'm imagining is actually happening in my life right now? Like, so of all the worst case scenarios that you're imagining, which are actually happening in the here and now? My guess is that very few, if any of them, are happening right now. And so if those aren't happening, ask yourself, like, what is actually happening? I'm not saying to ignore reality or pretend everything's fine if it's not, or that you shouldn't advocate or fight for what you believe is right. But ask, what's actually happening right now and what's within my control today and what isn't? It might help you to make an actual list, like physically take out a piece of paper and pen and make a list. These are the things I can control and these are the things I cannot. So in that left-hand column, you can control, like if you're looking at the things you can and cannot control, you can control your response to things, how you express your feelings and the actions you take. Like if you notice yourself mindlessly scrolling, overeating, drinking too much, snapping at other people, gently check in. What are other ways you can release those feelings? And then in the other column, the things you can't control, remind yourself that the things you can't control are election results, things like the weather, traffic, and other people's emotions or reaction. For us, we couldn't control whether or not the truck was going to have that death wobble again. It totally could. But we could take it to a mechanic, which we did. We could ask our friends for advice to see if they'd gone through this before, which they actually had. They helped normalize things for us. And we could work on calming ourselves down. This doesn't guarantee that things won't happen again, but we did everything that we could think of that was within our control. So remember that there's always something you can control, even if it's just a small choice about how you take care of yourself today. So if you're feeling your own version of a death wobble, put down your phone for 5 minutes, take a deep breath and ask yourself, okay, what can I do to support myself today? Think of 1 or 2 small things that might make today just a little bit better. Maybe that's simple as taking a walk or calling a friend to laugh over some silly animal videos or donating time or money to a cause you believe in. Whatever it is, remember that you have options even in uncertain times. Remind yourself of all those options and lean into the actions that help keep you grounded. And in case you're wondering, the mechanic did find something wrong with our truck that they were able to fix. It was a somewhat unexpected and hefty bill, but it was money well spent. And like I said before, it could totally happen again, but right now we're just living with this idea that we did everything that was within our control to help ourselves in the future. So thank you for joining me today. And if this episode resonated with you, I'd love for you to share it with someone who might need to hear it. And as always, if you'd like to connect one-on-one, you can find me at lynngrogan.com. I am here to support you in navigating any challenges in your life and finding the courage to live true to yourself. So until next time, my friend, and remember, you are stronger than you think you are, and you have what it takes to handle whatever comes your way. Hey friend, thank you for listening to today's conversation. If you're considering a major career or lifestyle change and you want to talk to someone about this, I'm here for you. You can learn how to work with me one-on-one on my website, which is lynngrogan.com, and I also have details in the show notes. See you next time.